has over the decades, of course, been formalized by way of formal bilateral relations and even a binational commission and trade relations. What is your assessment? Where do we stand right now?
Well, first of all, Thulas, allow me to say you are still young. You and your station, congratulations for being on air for the last 3 months. It's fantastic to watch you.
Thank you.
I'm a fan. I watch you and a couple of other stations, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Now, you're absolutely right. Germans were on board when Jan van Riebeeck came in 1652. And we've been here ever since. And Germans have become South Africans. There are a number of immigration waves coming to South Africa from Germany in the 18th, 19th, and also in the 20th century. And I think now one can say that Germans in South Africa are an integral part of this multifaceted rainbow nation, if you want. And the last 25 years, maybe the last 30 years, when we have seen this wonderful development of this country with the social, with the peaceful transition. I think there's 2 nations in the world who share the same destiny, that at a certain moment in history, in 1989 and 1990, you know, history can turn out all right. We had our own revolution, we had our own fall of the Berlin Wall, which indeed was not only something magical for Germany, but it was the unification of Europe, it was the end of the world, of the Cold War, and it had something to do with South Africa too. And you in South Africa, just 30 years ago, you had your magical moment too, when against all odds, when nobody thought it would be possible to have a peaceful transition without bloodshed, you made it. And
the beginning of the end of apartheid.
Everything happened. And we took it from there. And I think with this legacy of our national experiences, that things can turn out all right. We have given an example to the world with the people in East Germany that freed their country from injustice and from an authoritarian regime, and the people of South Africa that freed themselves from the scourge of apartheid. Right. And we share that, and we've been working together in the international scene and here in South Africa for a long time.
I imagine, Ambassador, that part of what you do as part of your tasks and your responsibilities is to give a holistic picture to Germany and other stakeholders in Germany about what South Africa looks like 25 years into democracy. What's that picture been like for you? You know, the national discourse in South Africa can be intense. We can get so involved in some of the developments that are happening. And I don't think I need to remind you of where we've come from over the last decade or so and where we are right now as a nation in terms of the national conversation, issues of destiny, which path will we choose? When you are asked these questions, what's your answer?
South Africa is a magnificent, but it's a very complicated country. For someone like me, who spends a part of his life living and working in South Africa, every day is a challenge because your country is so complicated, because it's so multifaceted, because you come from so many different walks of life, because there's so many languages you speak, there's so many traditions, cultures, histories involved. So my job every day is to try to understand every day a little bit more what this country, what your country is all about. And what I see is, from the bird's eye perspective, a country that has been prospering incredibly for the last 25 years. Before 1990, before 1994, the history of South Africans, wherever they came from, was whenever there's a problem, there's war and violence. And the whites subjected the blacks to what is called apartheid now, discrimination of slavery, if you want. In the last 25 years, you have a wonderful constitution, you have a wonderful political dispensation, you are free, and you have made a lot of it. That's the bird's eye perspective. Now that, of course, doesn't necessarily correspond with the feelings, even my feelings, in looking at what is happening on a day-to-day basis in South Africa. What I see there, and what I report to my superiors, to the German federal government in Berlin, is a country that is struggling to get out of 10 difficult political, economic, and social years. If you look at the economic and social factors in this country and the wish of the government to redress the injustices of the past, you see that beginning in 2013, in the statistics of South Africa, the transformation pump that is to giving justice to those that have been underprivileged has stopped. And I think the big challenge for South Africa now is to get that transformation pump back pumping so that the majority of this country gets the opportunities and the chances and the fulfillment of the hopes that they deserve in the last 20 years.
What is your assessment of our chances of getting what you are calling the transformation pump back pumping, given the strength of our democracy? For instance, what can South Africa do to strengthen its democracy more? Because part of the challenge we've faced has been a sense of some of the institutions perhaps not living up to their responsibilities and even out and out being weakened.
Well, first of all, we Europeans have have become lenient in defending our democracy and our rule of law because we have gotten used to things running brilliantly after the Second World War. Not so in South Africa. You are used to somehow operating on the edge of the cliff, on the edge of the abyss. And you are used to that, and your politicians are used to that. So I am quite optimistic that there's no reason to be in doom or be in desperation. I think South Africa has all the ingredients to be a successful country, to use the potential it has. And the fact that we have been able to watch and visit every day the 4 different commissions of inquiry, that we are able to watch on television what is going on between the Minister of Public Enterprises and the Public Protector, is an expression of a mature democracy, is an expression of a society where even dirty laundry gets hanged out in the public, in the open, because that's the first step to reestablishing the rule of law, justice, and a fair society. And I think South Africa has nothing to hide in front of us.
Speaking of that, Ambassador, I have to ask you, and this is not to say that, countries that do trade with South Africa, foreign companies, are wholly responsible for some of what happened in our country by way of corruption, state capture. But it is a reality that one German company, SAP, was mentioned in the context of state capture and a channeling of funds to a Gupta-linked company. And let me broaden it so that we don't talk about SAP, but we talk about matters of principle and perhaps rewind to the days of what we have come to call the arms deal period. And there was Ferrostal in the mix there, which did its own investigations with a particular outcome about its role. What's the conversation with much needed investors coming to South Africa from a country like Germany with about 600 companies that already operate in South Africa? What do you say? What is your message about how they conduct themselves in a way that enhances South Africa and doesn't detract from the nation building that we're trying to engage in?
Well, I think South Africa lost its innocence, the free South Africa and democratic South Africa lost its innocence in the arms deal. And I regret to say that also European companies were involved in what is now called the arms deal. I think whoever bribes someone is as guilty of an evil crime as the one that receives the bribe. So I would never, never ever stand and defend those that have been engaging in activities that we call in South Africa now state capture. And it is important that both parts of the game, those that have been paying the bribes or that have been manipulating the tenders, get known and get punished for what they do, and those that have done that inside the companies or inside government. Now, I think I can safely say that the German business community is well aware of that. There's a number of examples of companies that have come in the open, SAP is part of them, who have explained to the South African public, SAP, that they have failed the South African nation, that they have been embroiled in activities which are illegal, which they regret, but they have taken a very bold decision to not only change the business practices in South Africa, but in the entire world, because they have seen after what has happened with the way they did their business in South Africa, that through certain mechanisms, including also, I must say, black economic empowerment schemes, they got into a situation where they got in touch with people that promised them things and were able to manipulate things that shouldn't have happened. And they took a very bold decision, and the decision was, we are not going to cooperate at all in countries like South Africa that are susceptible to bribery or corruption according to Transparency International. We are not going to cooperate with any intermediary anymore. We are going to do our sales directly with the people that need our services.
Because that opens up that whole area of commissions, which are actually bribes in some of these transactions. Ambassador, I want us to continue our conversation. There's a whole chunk of conversation that we've not even covered.
Yes.
The changes that are happening in Europe, how they impact South Africa, Germany relations, and the whole issue of promoting more trade between us. So I'm going to keep you a few more minutes, if you don't mind. Let's conclude our conversation with Ambassador Martin Schäfer of the Republic of Germany. Sir, as we speak, Boris Johnson is basically the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's only a matter of formalities, really, for that to be concluded, done and dusted. What this talks to is a changing Europe and a changing dynamic in as far as Europe is concerned. The European Union being South Africa's biggest trading partner, followed by China, followed by Germany. What are the implications? For instance, let's start with the pending affirmation or ascendance of Boris Johnson to the Prime Minister's position in the United Kingdom. Firstly, for yourselves, for your country within the European scheme.
Good. It's been more than 3 years that we have become accustomed to that decision of the British people to leave the European Union. We deeply regret this decision, and frankly, we are having trouble to understand it properly. But we accept the democratic decision of the United Kingdom, and we have tabled lots of fair proposals to the Brits on how we can disentangle this relationship of more than 4 decades, which is a very complicated one. And we have in mind with that the remaining 27 members of the European Union stay as strong and as firm in the name of Europe as they possibly can. And now we are very much looking forward to responsible governance by the new British Prime Minister, who has been elected with a certain agenda, it seems. And we are going to wait and see in Brussels and in Berlin what approach he's going to take with us. He has been saying things in his election campaign. We are willing to engage in a fair deal. The deal is ready to be signed. And we have seen in British politics a number of challenges to take the proper decisions to go the way they would want to go and we would want to go. And this is not just a theoretical or political issue for South Africa. It has very concrete consequences. I'll give you one example. BMW produces the X3 in Rossland, right here in Gauteng. And a big number of those cars are being exported to the United Kingdom. Now, how do you do that when there's a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October, when there's no trade deal between the UK and South Africa? What does BMW do with the production line of the X3 going to the United Kingdom? There's tariff issues to be discussed. There's issues of rules of origin to be sorted out. It's a very complicated thing that might have a very concrete and hopefully not negative impact on production, employment, growth, and prosperity in South Africa.
That crystallizes very nicely when you give that example of how this decision by citizens of the United Kingdom actually has implications for not just European countries that are part of that bloc, but even trade partners such as South Africa, as you just gave the example. Speaking of trade, how does South Africa move from having the number of German companies that we've mentioned, about 600 or so, that are doing business in South Africa, the investment climate in South Africa? There are constantly issues being raised about policy uncertainty, the direction in which the country will go on some key policy issues. And President Cyril Ramaphosa has been on that drive to sort of suggest that actually there's nothing for you to worry about. The policy environment, our politics may be heated, but our policies will remain certain. How do we then move from just 600 to to perhaps doubling that or even more German businesses doing
Well, from the
business
first
in South
day,
Africa?
we and I personally have supported the investment drive of President Ramaphosa. I think this country needs and this country deserves foreign investment. So part of my work is to discuss issues of the investment climate in South Africa every day with investors from Germany, from other parts of the world. And I cannot hide the fact that indeed there are investors that are worried about the debates in the South African public space and certainly also within the ruling party. And I think it would be better if the things would get sorted out and if there were to be clear decisions that would give a clear indication to our investors, to the whole world, in which direction the South African politics are going. But German companies don't just come in for a couple of months and then leave afterwards. They have come to stay. A company like Siemens has been in South Africa for more than 150 years. And all the big car makers and their suppliers have been here for decades, sometimes for more than 100 years. And they are part and parcel of the South African economic sphere. They have come here to stay. In fact, South African companies, and above all the car manufacturers, make up more than 10% of South African exports. And that's the way we do business with South Africa. They invest in South Africa with all their knowledge and all their creativity in Industry 4.0. They produce cars made in South Africa, like the X3, like the Mercedes C-Class, like the Polo. And they export them from here into the world. And we prove every single day with German products made in South Africa that in this country you can produce world-class products that defy the competition, they don't have to fear the competition of anyone.
Very quickly then, Ambassador, what does President Ramaphosa, what does South Africa need to do to allay those concerns, and where are those concerns coming from? What do we do to address them? As a last question.
For me, the essence of it is the firm reestablishment of the rule of law. If that is being done, and if that is being perceived by the world and by the investors community, I don't have any worry at all about the future of South Africa, about the economic and social prosperity of the country, and about investors from Germany and elsewhere flocking into the country, investing here to create the jobs and the growth that is necessary to bring this country forward.
All right, Ambassador Martin Schäfer, thank you so much for coming through. Ambassador Martin Schäfer of the Federal Republic of Germany, having a wide-ranging conversation with us about Germany-South Africa bilateral relations and some of the implications of what's happening in Europe at the moment. Now,